The Woodlands Uncensored.
Go.
We're back.
And we're back alive. How about that, Dan? We took a
Yeah.
little break. At my age, I gotta take a little break for the bathroom every now and then. Anyway,
Understand.
remember us on Facebook, The Woodlands Uncensored, on YouTube, The Woodlands Uncensored, and you can always email us at thewoodlandsuncensored@gmail.com, and we do read those things every day, although we don't reply to every one of them. We've had a number of them. Anyway, we're back with Dan Hauser. Dan gave us some good information on the Woodlands, how he worked with George Mitchell, how it started. And I think we're going to get into a little detail on some of the nonprofits to start with, right, Dan?
Yeah, I think so. I think, uh, you know, in all my conversations, I might use the word we, but I played very little role, more than a fan and sometimes a participant, but more than that, a helpful in influencing the community to some of the things that needed to get done. And George was very smart and intuitive, and he knew what needed to happen. And he knew that the nonprofits and the churches were critical to to the community as well as to the success of the Woodlands. So many of you are familiar with Interfaith and the activities
Yeah.
and support he gave that organization of trying to grow the churches and with that the nonprofits in the area. And I think most people don't know that John Cooper School was originated by George and
Not know
started,
that.
and we got involved in that with him. He started the Houston Area Research Center. Skip Porter was instrumental in taking that to the next level within our community, and I think it was very important to stress the technological and medical and you name it, the environmental type issues that were out there. And George was right on the forefront, knocking on the door of trying to solve problems. It goes down to the Super Duper Collider project that we tried to get here in the area. Again, we were not successful, but made a vain attempt at it. I think the one of the things that happened through HARC was the supercomputer. And they
Yeah.
built a building in the Woodlands to put this large supercomputer to sell space to all other companies around or whatever. And he was so far ahead of the rest of the world in regards to this. But the interesting part is the size of the computer was an office building, and probably the size of a computer today that had the same capabilities is about this big.
That's exactly right. Just
And so that went by the wayside. He had a lot of failures. He tried to do a lot of things, and a lot of things failed, but typically they came around later on, okay, in another form or fashion. I mean, I love the story about the streets that have the rock in them, and the lights that are on the streets had this square feature with this box up there, and the light would come straight down, and they looked real pretty architecturally. They were great, but from a maintenance standpoint and an upkeep standpoint, and that he was going to donate the land or the roads to the county, they weren't going to maintain them. So all of his efforts to have these streets they looked like in the sunlight gold shining down them.
exposed aggregate streets.
Yeah, the rocks.
I live off of one in Grogan's Mill right now.
Yeah, they're right there today, and some of the lights are still there. I think the interesting part about the lights had this nice little box up there, and the lights would come straight down, but ended up birds and vultures would live and perch in them, so that it didn't look too good having vultures hanging around on your lights as you're coming into the Woodlands trying to sell them. So he had some interesting things that went awry. I think all of them he had opposition to. The county taking over the roads, had to form a road district, put HARC together. I think one of the interesting ones was Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion. I mean, that was a huge one that we got to get involved in, and everybody thought he was crazy, that it was never going to work, you know, and no one's going to come out here to go outside in Texas and watch performances, or for sure the Houston Symphony. And now it's one of the most successful outdoor theaters in the world, as is our community, one of the more outstanding communities in the United States. So I think, a lot of things came to fruition, sometimes by circumstance, sometimes very much delayed. And that was just fun getting involved and being a part of it. I think one of the things that I was able to be involved in was the Woodlands Community Association and its early life, where it was totally controlled by the developer in the early days.
And now it's the Woodlands. What is it, township?
It's what is the township now. It started off as the Woodlands Community Association and the Woodlands Commercial Development Association.
Okay.
Two separate associations within the community. And one he drove totally with the commercial side of the equation. And then on the residential, he allowed there to be, electorate board as a minority interest, basically, in the community association. And over time, that evolved and grew. And Michael Page and others were involved in developing the plan, basically, the plan for the township and where it was going to go and what the population would be and how it would evolve, to George not having control.
With just the complexity of the mud districts alone.
Oh, yeah. The mud districts alone. Again, we had at the time 4 or 5 muds. Now, whether 12 or so in the area. And the beauty of him putting together with Michael Page and others, the Joint Powers Association, and where all the muds worked together. They had central administration, and that was a feat in itself. And I don't even know how they would ever unwind that. But bottom line is, it was very successful. And some of the mud districts don't have any debt anymore. They've been so successful. But one of the things that I think there's misconceptions there is everybody sort of knows George's dream.
Yes.
Only a few people probably left in the Woodlands that have a real good feel for that.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to tell you that not too many people know what George would do. I do know this, that he would do it and he would drive it and he would make it successful. And he wasn't real hot about losing control of the Woodlands Community Association and what is now the township. I think he went along with it. And there's a lot of misconception, I think, a lot of misconception as to what he did or what he would do. And I feel very strongly that George would adapt and he would change with the environment, and he'd work with what was there. In that case, the ETJ, being within the ETJ of Houston, but didn't mean he liked it. Didn't mean there wasn't some way to get around it and for it to be an independent community. And because that's what it operated with.
Well, one of the things I heard is that right up front, he wanted the Woodlands to be a city. Is that correct? Did you see it that way?
Yeah, well, he knew that we were destined to be part of the within the ETJ of Houston, and they could annex us. But if you'll remember correctly, and some of them don't have short memories of what happened in Clear Lake City and then what happened in Kingwood, they did not go over well. They were disasters, and were forced to join Houston. And there's a lot of bad sentiment and a lot of bad press on that. And so that's when it sort of started that people were getting sort of scared as to whether they would be taken over, annexed by Houston. And that's when some of our political leaders, Tommy Williams and Rob Eislers and county judge and Kevin Brady's and you name it. Lots of people got involved in seeing what we could do, and they developed this township. They developed agreements with them, the Colson Tufts of the world, Bruce Tuft, Nelda Blairs. I can go on down the list of people who were familiar with where we were going on the political side. Ed Chance, county commissioner at the time. And so they all got together to try to make it so that we could prevent ourselves from being annexed by Houston. And they were very successful in making that happen. But
and that's House Bill 1149 or 1049 or something like that in the legislature that was passed. Isn't that correct?
Right. They had passed something in the legislature and they did it again not too long ago where it would have to be to be annexed, you'd have to have the vote of the populace. So that right there is a real plus.
Tremendous.
I mean, that's the coup de grace of the success of it was that the public is going to have to want it.
Yeah.
Okay. And which is the way it probably should be. And where it's going to evolve. This recent incorporation initiative and effort, while I know some people's hearts are in it, I guarantee you, all I would say is I don't think the community's ready for it. Okay, and doesn't have all the information and doesn't see a real good plan out there that makes sense without going into debt, without taking on strong taxes, without working agreements out with people. So again, not trying to be too political here. I can just say this, that the decision was made rightfully so by the community. And there's a lot of work and a lot of effort needs to be made among people who are independent and want to make sure that George's ambitions or designs for this community are met.
Continue on.
He wanted to make it better. He wanted to make it better. He didn't want us to be like the city down the street.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're not.
Yeah. We are different and we're better. And it's been proven. And so there's a formula that's been put in place that I think it's important to understand how we got where we are and why we're as well respected and thought of as we are. That doesn't mean we don't have a lot of things to do yet and a lot of improvement.
Well, we're going to have people or what you have called subject matter experts, and I like that a whole bunch, to talk about crime and talk about recreation. We're talking about the hospitals, how the sheriff's department works here. There are a lot of nuances to the Woodlands that really all come together and make this just a wonderful community to live in.
You hit it on the nail, Pete. I mean, the bottom line is there needs to be a consensus of where we're going. There needs to be support from all sides. There needs to be well thought out, well planned, and understand the financial ramifications. And I think that'll happen. I think that'll happen if the right people are put in the right places. And remember, George wanted to make things better, and so that's what we ought to be shooting for. But you just hit the nail when you said crime and urban development. We are no longer a residential community.
Oh.
We are now an urban center, and things are going to start growing up. And so we need to prepare ourselves for crime, for the traffic control, those kind of things. Those are the issues we should be debating and dealing with, not who's in control.
Yeah.
We need to be solving issues and not just, have a lot of rhetoric out there.
Well, I wanted to ask you one other thing, and that is kind of, I'm trying to keep these at 30 minutes, and
Sure.
We're about 15 into this one. He sold the Woodlands. Corporation. Why in the world did he do that? Because he loved this.
Well, at one point in George's career, if I'm not mistaken, he started to have to get involved in some career financial planning, as all of us do, towards his family
Yep.
and towards the company. And so he was getting on in age, and I imagine Cynthia pushed him a little bit to try to get get everything in order.
Yep.
And I think at the time, I think there was a demand for real estate was up. So if you're going to sell when it's up. And same thing with the energy company. Let's see. Now he sold the energy company first, right? I think that's right, and got his $3.1 billion out of it. And so the bottom line was he was smart and astute and knew the right time to sell his company. And I think he wanted to spend more time on the real estate side and on Galveston and Mitchell Development of the Southwest properties he had in that. And so he wanted to spend more time on that. And then eventually it became time, I think, after the mall had got up and got successful and everything was going well. And so again, that's the time they got the two major things were the mall and the Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion, the waterway, you name it. Those were real big in terms of making this a very solid investment.
He also did a lot of development down in Galveston because he was born there. He loved Galveston. And he did a lot of investment and renovation.
Right.
I guess they call it the Strand down there. I'm not real familiar.
Yeah, he developed the Strand. He put a lot of money into Galveston. Colson Tuff was very much involved in all the architectural initiatives he had down there, Michael Richmond and others, the San Luis Hotel and then the Convention Center and the Tremont House and all of the things related to the Strand. I mean, they had some benevolent people, the Stewart family, the Moody families, the Mitchell families, and Tillman Fertitta and his family, very strong, wealthy, born on the island people that helped make that community really made it nice.
I think George went to A&M. He was in the service. I read that he was in the service.
Yeah,
and he went to the Army Corps of Engineers, and they put him in charge of. He actually worked with the Howard Hughes Tool Company down in Houston to make gun barrels for the war effort. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, the history of him and the Howard Hughes Company in its own. I can give another 30 minutes on Howard Hughes and his involvement here and his banking relationship in Houston before he moved to Vegas. Okay. and then how the worm turned and then they moved to Dallas and the public company bought the Woodlands. It's interesting. And how Hughes Tool, Hughes Christensen,
right,
Baker Hughes, all of those companies, evolved, I guess you could say.
And, as a side note, a friend of mine owns one of the last jets that Howard Hughes owned, and he's got it up in Magnolia, and it's pieced out. So he's got the cockpit in place, and he's got some of the wings there, but that's it. And when the Market Street was opening, I went to the guy that was the manager of Market Street, and I said, "Listen, I'd like to donate. A friend of mine owns this. I'd like to donate it, and we'll fix it up, and so kids could go in and play like they're flying Howard Hughes' jet, and it's really his plane." They didn't like my idea. Like most people don't like my ideas. But
how much time do you have? I've got one story on Howard Hughes. I'll give you that. It's related.
Right ahead.
Okay. Well, simple as this. I was 24, 25-year-old loan officer, and account was transferred to me called Hughes Tool. And they had a small account with us at the bank. He had some business in our trust department, but he did most of his banking down the street, Texas Commerce Bank. And I pull up the file, and it's about, a quarter of an inch thick. It had 3 pieces of paper in it. Had a financial statement for Howard Hughes from 1953. Okay. And what is this? I'm 77 or 76 at the time. And so we're going to go call on Howard Hughes. Well, he had just left. He's in Vegas. He wasn't there. So you had to deal with his president at the time. And it was a guy by the name of James Lesh. James Lesh. And so we go out to Howard Hughes on Navigation or Harrisburg, wherever it was. And there were guns and turrets and wire fences up and everything. He did secret work for the government. And you didn't get in there unless you were invited. And so we go in, and God, we were sort of nervous. And we go visit with this guy, James Lesh. And we didn't know him from Adam, but he was Howard Hughes' #1 man. Well, again, fast forward 4 years. I'm in the Woodlands, renting a house on Slash Pine, and I need to go to see a doctor. And I go to the information center, where there was only one doctor in town at the time in the Woodlands. And the guy's name was Jack Lesh, Dr. Jack Lesh. And I say, Jack Lesh, I've heard that name somewhere before. He was Jane Lesh's, the president and CEO of Howard Hughes' corporation's son. And he lived in the Woodlands and was the first doctor in the Woodlands that I know of. There might have been another one, a Dr. Mock, but just so as the world turns, here we are talking to Howard Hughes's senior officer, and then 20 years later they come in and buy the whole.
Yeah, and in Lauren's book, Cynthia Mitchell, she kidded with George because he always wanted an overseas deployment when he was in the Army, and so she said, "Well, going from here to the island of Galveston, that's overseas. So you got your deployment." So,
yeah,
well, that's good, and it's kind of funny because things come around, and Hughes is back here, but it was sold twice, I think, before Hughes actually bought it.
Well, that's part of the aggravation we had in the early days is when George tried to get a higher educational facility here, and he kept coming up against a brick wall. And most people don't know, in the early days, to form a bank, to form a hospital, to form a educational facility, you had to get state approval. You had to get a charter. You had to go through a charter process, and that gave all the opposition the ability to stand up and go against you, and to try to, or your competition to go against you and beat you out for the charter. And we had that problem with the bank. We had that problem with the hospital, and George had that problem with the University of Houston coming here. Is that the A&Ms, and they tried to, I don't know, stifle competition in the educational area. They didn't do branching like they did in California. You had branches for the University of California everywhere,
That's right.
So it just is a way for the big guys to control the little guys, is what it really what it amounted to. And George ran up against that. We were hoping he'd get A&M to have a place here, and now it's evolved that Sam Houston is stepping in and going to have a good facility here at some time. So things work out.
Mm-hmm.
Things work out.
Yeah, everything works out one way or the other.
Well, the interesting one was, we fought to get a community college here, and it got declined. The public voted against it, mainly because Conroe didn't want us to have it. Okay. And so we lost the first time around, and we didn't give up. We went back a few years later, and Mary Madison and John Wiesner and David Vogt and people in the community got together, and we made it happen. And the Woodlands did it, and they also put a location up on 242. I think that helped us a lot for it to be more centrally located. And that initiative in itself got the community college to move their headquarters here. And now we have the headquarters of the largest community college in the state of Texas and possibly in the United States. I don't know exactly, but almost 100,000 students that go to now Lone Star Community College. So again, failures on multiple fronts became a very success at the end, and that marked sort of George's story, I think, through the years.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of people's story. Failure is in everybody's past, but you just got to keep persevering for what you love to do.
Exactly.
Finally,
Well, I found that out in banking, Pete. I found that out in banking.
oh, I guess,
I like
I guess
loaning
you
money
did.
to people who had failed because they knew what they screwed up and they knew what they had to do to be successful.
Well, I wish the hell I'd have met you back when I had knee pads on. I begged to so many bankers.
Well, they're paying us, aren't they?
I was buying a company in Ireland. Heck, I didn't even know where the hell Ireland was. So I went to the bank to borrow the money to buy the company in Ireland. And they said, "What in the world are you doing buying a company in a country that you know nothing about?"
Yeah.
I said, "Why, it was New Year's Eve. I thought it was a good idea at the time."
Well, interesting.
But it
I
succeeded.
did some financing with companies that went and built structures over in Scotland and Ireland. Special financing was available at that time, and they were successful, as you were.
Yeah, finally, it took me a while. Well, listen, thank you so much. We may come up with something else and get another 30 minutes out of you, but I do want to talk to you about some of these other people like Michael Page.
Oh, yeah.
You were gracious enough to invite me to your coffee club, and we listened to him. And what a wealth of knowledge Mike is.
Yeah, he's been through it all, and he knows the angles and everything. He knows where the skeletons are buried.
Yeah.
And the struggles that George had. But there were a lot of successes that just kept us going.
Oh, yeah. A lot of successes. Well, once again, this is the Woodlands Uncensored, and we urge you to write us at the Woodlands Uncensored at gmail.com and put anything you want on Facebook. I'm in Facebook jail for what happens with Facebook, and I didn't know this until I got in there, is when you do a business type of account like this is, not personal, but business, they lock you out for making comments for 30 days. And so I'm locked out to September 19th to make comments. But on YouTube, we get stuff on YouTube. And anyway, so Dan, thank you so much.
Pete. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you in about 2 minutes when I walk over to the other office.
Take care.
Hey, thanks a lot, Dan. See you.